All right. So let's start with Deuteronomy 4:19. Actually, we covered this our last class, but that was like 6 weeks ago or so, and it's worth looking at again. And lest you lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, which the Lord your God assigned to all peoples under the entire heaven, and be drawn away to prostrate yourselves before them and worship them. Okay, so, right, so this is in the context of a warning against apostasy, right? God through Moses has given us all of these laws that we have to follow, and one of the purposes is, lest we start worshiping the heavens, which the Lord your God assigned to all peoples under the entire heaven. Now, what is noticeable about this verse that might be problematic to Rashi? Anything? I mean, what does it say about the non-Israelite peoples worshiping the heavenly bodies? All right, let me back up. In general, all right, forget this verse. Do you think that in Judaism it's okay for non-Jews to worship the sun, the moon, and the stars? So you're muted.
I always thought that we were taught to respect the beliefs of other people, but not to follow them. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm not too educated on this particular.
Right. Well, look, I mean, there's a difference between sort of prudential guidance and religious law. Okay. I mean, here, and it's a complicated subject. Okay. What is clear is that Judaism does not posit that everybody needs to be Jewish. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
That's for sure. However, all right, forget about the question of whether we have the ability to enforce it, okay? And forget about the question about whether it's even a good idea given our minority status, okay? And given our dependence on a sort of live and let live modus operandi, which has served us well in this country, and which parenthetically makes Alito's ruling, if it goes into effect, very dangerous, because it basically says Christianity is right and Judaism is wrong, which we've never had before. But so forget all of those things, right? Judaism. All right, so let me ask it, and let me again phrase it in the form of a question. In Jewish law, okay, irrespective of our ability to enforce it, et cetera, in Jewish law, to whom is idolatry forbidden?
The Jewish people. I mean,
no, everyone. Everyone. Okay, everyone is forbidden to worship idols. Okay, there are ways other than Judaism to worship the true God. Okay, and it is an ongoing halachic debate about whether Gentiles are allowed to be atheists, right? Because, right, there's a difference between a prohibition of idolatry and an obligation to worship the true God, right? An atheist isn't an idolater, right? They're also not a worshiper of the true God, right? So that's debatable, right? But nobody is allowed to be an idolater. Okay, again, we can't enforce it. We wouldn't even if we could, et cetera, right? But if you take as a given the notion that idolatry is forbidden to everyone, not just Jews, right, then this is a problematic verse, isn't it? Right? Because it says, you might look up to the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, which the Lord your God assigned to all peoples under the entire heaven, right? So this verse seems to, right, this verse contradicts everything that I just said, right? It seems to say, not only is it okay for them to worship the heavenly bodies, but in fact, God specifically assigned the heavenly bodies to the non-Israelite nations, right? But that's why you can't have too close contact with them, because they might seduce you, draw you astray, right? So this is going to be a problem for Rashi. Okay, so here's how he understands it, looking at the second comment on the verse. Okay, which the Lord assigned to illuminate for them. In other words, so one way that Rashi's reading this is he didn't assign the sun, the moon, and the stars for worship, right? He assigned the sun and the moon and the stars for light, right? Just like, I mean, the sun, the moon, and the stars don't only light the universe for the Jews, right? They light the universe for everybody, right? So that's one way of understanding that verse, right? That's one way. Another explanation, which God assigned to them as deities, okay? That seems to be what it says. God assigned the heavenly bodies to the non-Israelite peoples as deities. He says, no. Don't read that too literally. He did not prevent them from erring after them, rather that he caused them to slip with their futile speculations in order to drive them out of the world. Similarly, it says this is in Psalms, I looked it up, this whole Psalm is a malediction against idolatry. He smoothed the way for him in his eyes to find his iniquity, to hate him. In other words, it's not that God actually affirmatively told them to worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, but he didn't prevent them from doing it either. Okay. Which is sort of, this is like the Pat Robertson explanation for 9/11, right? That it's not that God sent the planes on 9/11, right? But God withdrew his protection from the United States because of our allowing abortion and homosexuality and all these other horrible, terrible things, which thank God we're finally going to get rid of after a long. I don't take that seriously. I mean, take seriously what Pat Robertson said, but so that, sometimes God prevents us from falling into error, but not here, which actually, I mean, is a similar explanation for the statement in Exodus, the repeated statement in Exodus, that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, right? Because that seems morally problematic, right? If God hardened Pharaoh's heart, how is it reasonable to punish him for something that was out of his control, right? But if you read the text, really carefully, the first 5 plagues, it says Pharaoh hardened his heart. The second 5 plagues, it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay, so the idea is that, I mean, I would explain this kind of psychologically, is that you start a bad habit, right? And it becomes so ingrained that you feel that you're powerless to stop it, right? And at that point, you really, it's not that God is making you do it, but you might feel that God is making you do it, right? Because it's so out of your control, right? The Talmudic statement is, "B'derech she'adam rotzeh leilech molichin oto," okay? That they, and it's not clear exactly who the they are, but let's say the forces of the universe or the forces of nature, help us to go in the direction that we have already decided to go, right? If we want to do good, God helps us do good. And if we want to do evil, God helps us do evil, right? And so that's the real meaning of this verse, is that their inclination was already set on idolatry, and God simply allowed them to do what they wanted to do anyway. I have to say, I'm not sure that I buy it. I'm not sure that I buy it historically, and I'm not sure that I buy it morally, right? In other words, look, that I believe that the text is not unitary, right? And that it represents stages of evolution of Jewish beliefs, right? And that something could be from the sort of earliest stratum, and then later generations look at this and say, it can't possibly mean what it says, right? But it doesn't mean that the author didn't in fact mean what the text actually says, right? And I've already, explained ad infinitum ad nauseum this concept of henotheism, but briefly, right, that indeed there are multiple deities, and that each deity has jurisdiction over either a particular nation or over a particular piece of land. And in the ancient Near Eastern world, for the most part, land and nation went together anyway. So really a distinction without a difference, right? And so it could well have meant that, yeah, God did in fact assign different heavenly bodies to different nations, right? But later generations are going to look at that and say, can't possibly mean what it says, right? So we have to figure out what it does mean, because it doesn't mean that. All right. All right, next verse, 422. For I will die in this land, I will not cross the Jordan. You, however, will cross, and you will possess this good land. Okay, so what's the problem in this verse? Right? right? There's a pleonasm, okay? A pleonasm means excess verbiage, right? Right? I mean, Rashi says that, right? I will die in this land, I will not cross the Jordan, right? The pleonasm is I will not cross the Jordan, right? If I'm going to die in this land, right, for sure, I'm not going to cross the Jordan, right? I'm dead, right? If I die in Transjordan, I ain't crossing the Jordan. So what? In other words, it was enough for the text to simply say, "For I will die in this land," right? I will not cross the Jordan is superfluous. It's superfluous, right? But Rashi says it means not, oh, I'm not going to cross the Jordan even after my death, right? Unlike Jacob, right, who died in Egypt, and then after he died, his sons brought him back to be buried in Hebron, right? Or Joseph, right? I mean, Jacob and Joseph were different, right? Jacob died, was embalmed in Egypt because it was obviously, I mean, the body would not have successfully made the journey otherwise, right? But he was embalmed in Egypt and then immediately brought to Eretz Yisrael for burial, right? Whereas Joseph was embalmed but left in Egypt, right? But made his brothers and sons promise that that when they returned to Israel, they would take his body and bury him there, right? And again, facts, who knows, right? But the belief is that that's what, I mean, the Torah specifically says they brought Joseph's body back and they buried him in Shechem, which is not today Nablus in the West Bank. And in fact, I mean, and the tomb of Joseph has been a constant sore point between Israelis and Palestinians since 67, because it's in the middle of the most densely populated city in the West Bank. And it was desecrated again within the last few weeks. Palestinians broke in and desecrated the tomb, right? But right, he will die and not cross the Jordan. And where is Moses buried? We don't know, right? I mean, right? No, right? I mean, the Torah is very explicit. At the very end of the Torah, it says that he died on Mount Nebo and God buried him. God buried him on Mount Nebo, and nobody knows his burial place to this day, right? But according to the Torah, it is in Transjordan. Where exactly? Unknown. Okay, now, interestingly, the Muslims don't believe this. If you've been to Israel and you go from Jerusalem down to the Dead Sea, you pass a place called Nebi Musa. Nebi Musa is Arabic for the prophet Moses. And the Islamic belief is that that's where Moses' tomb is. Although I don't believe like there is actually a building that they will point to and say, or a grave and say this is Moses' tomb, but they believe that that's the place where he was buried, which contradicts the biblical view because it's on the west side of the Jordan and not on the east side of the Jordan. Okay, but interestingly, I mean, the second part of the verse, even though Rashi doesn't comment on it, you, however, will cross and you will possess this good land. All right. Now, this is, in other words, this is a promise, right? Because Moses doesn't want the people to flip out, right? I mean, what are we going to do now that Moses is dead, right? I mean, that's the whole golden calf thing, right? He went up on the mountain. They didn't know how long he was going to be there. He didn't come down. They thought he was never coming back, and they flipped out and built the golden calf, right? Well, Moses doesn't want to repeat that mistake. So he said, yes, I'm going to die, and I'm not going with you, and not even my body is going with you, but you will cross over and possess the land, right? He's reassuring him. Okay, next verse, 4:44. And this is the teaching which Moses set before the children of Israel. Okay, now look at the Hebrew. It might sound familiar, right? V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael. Sound familiar, Sue? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I was actually looking for it online, and I don't think I ever received it, the printout.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure I sent it. I mean, I know I sent it out. Maybe somehow you didn't get it. But I'll read the verse again. Okay.
Mhm.
But at any rate, it's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 44. Okay. And in English, and this is the teaching which Moses set before the children of Israel. The Hebrew is V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael.
Oh, that's part of the service on Shabbat or
Right.
holidays. Also, when you lift the Torah up.
Right. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael.
If you had,
right?
if you had sung it, then I would have gotten it right away.
I know, but that would have made it too easy. Right now, so the word Torah is translated here as teaching, and that's literally what it means, teaching. V'zot haTorah, this is the teaching, this one which he is about to set down after this chapter. Okay, so Rashi understands this verse in its context very differently than we understand it liturgically, right? Because when we lift up the Torah scroll, right, and we show it, we go V'zot haTorah asher, right? What do we mean when we're saying V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe, right? This is the Torah, right? So the verse in its context means the next several verses, right? But when we hold up the Torah scroll and we sing that verse, what are we asserting?
The whole Torah, the whole.
Right, exactly. Right. This is the Torah, and we point to it, right? This is the Torah which was revealed to Moses, right? But what's fascinating, at least to me, right, is that like the most fundamental theological difference between conservative Judaism and Orthodox Judaism is the dogma of the Mosaic revelation of the Pentateuch, right? In other words, you cannot, I'm going to say this very carefully, you cannot be Orthodox unless you claim to believe that the Torah that we have today in its entirety was revealed by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. So I'm saying you have to claim to believe it. I'm not saying you have to believe it, right? Because there's no, thank God, even in Orthodoxy, there's no grand inquisitor, right? And I am absolutely certain that there are Orthodox rabbis who do not, in fact, believe that. Okay, but the minute you acknowledge that you don't believe that, you have transformed yourself from an Orthodox rabbi to a former Orthodox rabbi. But and I'm not saying that conservative Jews cannot believe that, but we're not required to believe that, right? And for the most part, we do not. Okay, I certainly do not. Okay, and what's fascinating about this dogma, and I'll use that term unironically, is that the Torah never makes that claim about itself, right? The Torah never says, essentially, I was revealed in my entirety to Moses on Mount Sinai, right? And Rashi could have used this verse to make that claim, but he doesn't. He says, no, that's not what it means. That's not what it means. When it says Zot HaTorah, it doesn't mean this is the Pentateuch. It means this is the instruction. Which instruction? The instruction that's about to come in the next few verses. Right now, look, I don't know enough about the history of Jewish belief, right? And I don't know enough about what Rashi actually believed, right? So I don't know whether Rashi believed in the dogma of Mosaic revelation or not. I don't know. I don't know, and I don't really care, right? But if he did, and if he thought that doctrine was subject to being disputed, he could well have used that verse to make that claim. And he doesn't use that verse to make that claim. Okay, which again, to me, is just kind of interesting. Yeah, Sue.
Is there anything in the Torah, though, that actually, like, I mean, as I remember the story, it talks about the 10 Commandments, but I don't remember anything where it would even suggest that the entire Torah was revealed there.
No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it makes that claim.
I mean, I just wonder where
beyond the 10 Commandments. I don't believe it makes that claim. And again, I mean, look, I mean, the book that really delves into this question is Abraham Joshua Heschel's Torah min hashamayim ba'asbaklaria shel hadorot, which means Torah from heavens in the mirror of the generations. Okay, where it is literally a history of that doctrine. Okay, the Hebrew original is 3 volumes in Hebrew. All right, there's an abridged English translation by Professor Gordon Tucker of JTS. The abridged English translation is about this thick. Okay, I have it. I have not read it. I've looked at it, but I haven't read the whole thing. Okay, so like, prize to anybody who has. So, but I don't know enough about the history of that doctrine, in all honesty. I mean, maybe I should, but I don't, to tell you when they first started asserting it, or why, for that matter. Okay, I don't really, I don't know the answer to either of those questions. Barnaby, maybe you do. I mean, there, you know stuff that I don't know sometimes.
I think part of it has to do with the rise of Islam and as a reaction to Quranic purism and supersessionism,
Right.
in that the Quran, the Muslims assert that the Quran is the uncorrupted version of God's message to the world. And in reaction, this is especially apparent with Maimonides, the Rambam, but
Right.
also with the Karaite movement, believe it or not.
Right.
And they began to assert that no, it is our Torah that is the original revelation, of which not a single letter has changed.
Right. I was actually going to speculate that that was the case, but it was pure speculation, not, but which given what you've just said, doesn't make it unsurprising that Rashi is not particularly invested in that claim. Because even though Islam existed when Rashi was writing, he was in France, probably, I mean, Islam was not really a big concern for him, or combating Muslim claims about the revelation of the Quran. Not an issue for Rashi, right? Would certainly have been an issue for Rambam, Maimonides, who lived in the Muslim world, right? But I mean, when Rashi was writing, I'm thinking that there wasn't, especially in France, I mean, maybe for, you know, that there wasn't that much of a penetration of Muslims or knowledge of Islam. I mean, I'm sure he knew that it existed, but whether it was really sort of a big concern for him, probably not. I'm gonna guess. Okay. So the next verse, these are the testimonies, statutes, and ordinances which Moses spoke to the children of Israel when they went out of Egypt. Okay, these are the testimonies which Moses spoke. They are the very same ones that he spoke when they went out of Egypt, and he taught it to them again in the plains of Moab. Okay, so this is, I mean, this is a little bit undermining what I just said, but not a lot, because he's still not invested in proving that it was all given at Sinai. He's just saying that there's no contradiction between what was given at Sinai and what's being given now. Okay, which is a concern, because if you read the various law codes in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, right? And if you read it, you know, without the benefit of knowledge of rabbinic teaching about it, you would see conflicts and contradictions, right? Now, the rabbis generally have harmonized those conflicts and contradictions, you know, but you have to accept that those, you know, harmonizations are accurate. Okay, 5:3. Not with our forefathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us, we, all of whom are here alive today. Okay. Not with our forefathers alone did the Lord make this covenant, but with us. Okay. Right. Which, in other words, you don't have the ability to say, all right, that was then, this is now. Right. That, you know, hey, look, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they may have accepted it, but that doesn't obligate me. No, it does, right? You are making this covenant also. And this is, I mean, this claim will be repeated towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy in Parashat Nitzavim, right? Which we read on the Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, right? Yeah, Sue.
And also that's part of the Passover Seder. You know, when you think about the story of the four sons and the one that's, you know, one of them is obligated to continue, you know, the son that says it's your traditions and not mine.
Right, absolutely, right? Maha avodah hazot lachem, right? What does this service, this worship, what does it mean to you? Right, to you is a lachem v'lo lo, right? To you, not to him. Right, so yeah, so the wicked son is making the same claim that Moses seeks to foreclose here, right? And that's what it says in Nitzavim, right? You are standing this day, right, all of you before the Lord, right? I am not making this covenant only with he who is here today, but with he who is not here today. Okay, which the normative understanding of that, and I think the normative understanding is actually correct, is that it doesn't mean like not only the people who are here, but also the people who might, you know, not have been here by chance. They were on a journey, or they were in the bathroom, or whatever. But all generations, right? That the covenant is made for all generations, right? And the rabbinic understanding of conversion is that the soul of the convert was present at Sinai also, right? And how it is that a Jewish soul got born into a non-Jewish body, whatever, we don't have to go into that, right? But that's the belief that and Muslims have that same belief, actually, in a certain sense. I mean, I don't know what it is in Arabic because I don't speak Arabic, right? But if you meet a religious Muslim and they are talking about somebody who has converted to Islam, they will not call him or her a convert. They will call him or her a revert. A revert. In other words, what? That they were always Muslim, right? They were in certain sense always Muslim. They're just coming back to their roots. Now, and this goes to what Barnaby said a few minutes ago, is that for Muslims, right? I mean, you know, we were talking about Nebi Musa, right? Well, why do the Muslims care where Moses' grave is anyway, right? And the answer to them is that Moses is a Muslim prophet. Okay, Moses is a Muslim prophet, and he was a Muslim, right? And the Jews who left Egypt were Muslims, right? And then they falsified the Torah. The Torah was revealed, and then the rabbis falsified it. They changed it here and there, right? Which is why it became necessary for the Gospels to be revealed, right? And then the bishops falsified and changed it here and there, right? Which is why it was necessary for the Quran to be revealed. And the Quran was the final and perfect revelation, right? And of course, the fundamentalists of every religion, no, ours was, right? Ours was never changed, et cetera, et cetera. right? But this, so the covenant is made with every Jew, not just those who are present at that time. Okay, face to face, the Lord spoke with you at the mountain out of the midst of fire. So Rabbi Berechia said, do not say that I am misleading you about something that does not exist as an agent does, acting between the seller and the buyer, because behold, the seller himself is speaking with you. Okay, doesn't reflect very well on realtors maybe, but the point is, right, that Moses is making the claim, you saw and you heard, okay, and this gets back, I mean, I don't know, there's this work of philosophy called the Kuzari, okay, which by Yehuda Halevi, where he tries to prove that the Torah is authentic revelation as compared to the Gospels and the Quran. Okay, and this is essentially the argument that he makes, right? In other words, according to the Torah, who saw and heard the revelation at Sinai?
Like all the people that were there.
All the people that were there, right? Who saw the resurrected Jesus?
The people at the tomb, I guess, or
right, the people at the tomb.
They didn't see anything, I guess, in the tomb, but
well, they saw the empty tomb, right? But then he did, he appeared, he stayed on earth in his resurrected form for I think 40 days or so, and he appeared to the disciples. He appeared to first to the 3 women at the tomb, right? And then to his disciples, right? So who saw the resurrected Jesus? 15 people, right? As opposed to 600,000 adult men, plus women and children and so on and so forth, right? And to whom was the Quran revealed? Muhammad, one person, right? So the argument is, right, you can easily fabricate the claim of the revelation of the Quran because there's only one person. He could have lied. Right? A little bit more difficult, but not so difficult to fabricate the claim of Jesus' resurrection. Who saw the resurrected Jesus? 15 people, right? Little harder to get a conspiracy among 15 people, but not impossible, right? 600,000 people all in on the conspiracy, especially when you're dealing with Jews, highly unlikely, right? So, right, I mean, I will tell you, right, the number of emails I have seen in the last 10 years that I was not supposed to see is extraordinarily high. Right, which is why I am very careful about what I put in email, right? Dance as if no one is looking, email as if it's going to be on the front page of the Times tomorrow morning, right? Right, but that's the claim, that you saw the revelation at Sinai, and therefore it's authentic and not fabricated. Okay, we'll do two more verses. All right, 5:7. You shall not have the gods of others in my presence. That's kind of an idiosyncratic translation. Not necessarily a wrong translation. The Hebrew is lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai, usually translated as you shall not have other gods, but the gods of actually, gods of others is probably a bad translation, actually. Although it's maybe going back to the thing that we read about the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? In my presence, right? Now, why? Now, remember, this translation is from Chabad, and it's easy to understand. I mean, not that this is not that we're dealing with why does Chabad translate things a certain way, but why would they translate, instead of saying other gods, the gods of others? Because there are no other gods. There are no other gods. And if you translated other gods, it might imply that other gods exist, right? Whereas the gods of others are non-gods, right? I don't know. I mean, I think it means what it says, right? Which is to say, yeah, there are other gods. There are other gods. You're just not supposed to worship them, right? Other gods exist. They're not as powerful as Yud He Vav He, and you're not supposed to worship them, right? Which is why you shouldn't have them in my presence, right? Where is my presence? Everywhere, right? When is my presence? Eternally, right? That's what God says. Okay. So 5:12, this is the last verse we'll look at. In fact, we're only going to look at the first comment, because otherwise we're going to get too far afield, and we'll come back to this in 2 weeks. Okay, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho kasher tzivcha Adonai Elohecha. Keep or observe the Sabbath day to sanctify it as the Lord your God commanded. Okay, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. Right, if you look at the 10 Commandments in Exodus, it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. Right? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Here it says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. Right? Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Right now, not a problem, because observe, keep, not a big deal, but a big problem, right? Because this is supposed to be a word for word recap of the 10 Commandments, right? So we were saying, the Torah only claims the 10 Commandments were given at Sinai, right? How many times? Once, right? So how do you have one version that says, remember the Sabbath day, and another version that says, observe the Sabbath day, when they're both supposed to be faithful accounts of what God said? So did God say Zachor, or did God say Shamor? Right? And Rashi says, well, actually, he says both, right? Both of them were spoken simultaneously as one word and were heard simultaneously, right? Now you say, how is that possible? And Rashi says, because it's God, right? You can't do that, but God can. The divine speech is not like human speech, right? So did God say Shamor, or did God say Zachor? He said both. At the same time? Yes. At the same time. Which did they hear? Both. At the same time? Yes. Right? Which is why in Lecha Dodi, what does it say? Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad hishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Right? Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. Shamor and Zachor in one word, in a single utterance. The one God caused us to hear, right? That's what Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad means. Now, obviously, Lecha Dodi is, 500 years after Rashi, and 2,500, 3,000 years after the Sinai event, right? But it's not like the author of Lecha Dodi didn't invent this concept. He just put it into a poetic form of lyrics. Okay, great. Any questions or comments? All right, great. Thank you, Lila Tov. Good night. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very
Thanks.
interesting as always.
Thanks. See ya.